Hello and welcome to Gaming the Podcast, where this week we're doing things a little bit differently. I'm Stace Harmon, joined as ever by John Robertson, but this week John and I are also joined by a couple of very special guests, and we're all going to be discussing the making of our latest book, 20 Double Fine Years. A quick bit of housekeeping for those who don't know. 20 Double Fine Years is our big anniversary book celebrating the first 20 years of Double Fine Productions, and it features art and stories from every one of Double Fine's games, along with the studio's extracurricular activities like Day of the Devs and Amnesia Fortnight, and their work with two-player productions, and a lot more. So if that sounds like something you might be interested in, then go check it out on our website, indiebydesign.net or doublefinebook.com. Okay, so on to our special guests. With us today, we have our good friend and freelance designer who worked with us on the book, Richard, and we also have another good friend and a Double Fine Productions stalwart. He's the Director of Marketing and Communications at the studio. It's James Spafford. Gents, it's lovely to be in the same virtual room, at least, with you. And I'm hoping that this is all going to go really well and very smoothly. So, on to our first point of discussion, which is, I'm going to go to you first, Spaff. It was a good long while ago now that we started talking about this book, and if you can cast your mind back to all that time ago, why was it, do you think, that it was important to you personally and also to the studio for a book like this to exist?
It's quite a big question, actually, I think, for me, and it involves a little bit of history, perhaps, about why I'm even at the studio to begin with, which is that, I've grown up, as many people have, as a big fan of Tim and his LucasArts games, but that led me to create fan sites for those games, and that in turn led to me getting a job in the industry and becoming a community manager, but also as a huge fan of Double Fine when it kicked off. I happened to be in America, and we knew Tim had left LucasArts, and we wanted to find out what he was up to, so we looked him up in the phone book under Double Fine, which is, we knew that was the company name, but little else. And we gave him a call and asked if we could have lunch with him, and he was very gracious and said yes. And so my friend and I, we were the first fans to sort of have a studio visit with Double Fine and figure out what they were up to. And he even let us reveal a corner of the Double Fine logo on our website, the two-headed baby. We revealed its ankles in a little zoomed out shot. Anyway, years later, Tim came to me and, they needed a community person, and they knew I was a big fan and wanted to move out here. And so I've ended up here. So then as we come to 20 years of Double Fine, it's obviously, as a huge fan of everything the studio has been doing over the years anyway, personally, it just felt like a moment we really needed to celebrate. And, no one had tackled the immense number of games, all the art, all the crazy things the studio has been up to in 20 years. It's a phenomenal amount of things. And so it just felt like, now is the time, let's do this. So thankfully you guys showed up sort of right around the right time.
Yeah, so it was an extraordinary coincidence that, we were happening to look at who we could do our next book in partnership with. Double Fine were looking for people to make a book, and here we are a few years later, and the book's out, and the studio has turned 20, and in fact 21 since. It's been quite the journey in both respects. So let's bring in John and Richard. You guys obviously have been working on this book from the beginning as well. We also should just give a quick shout out to Dom Palmer, who he worked on our previous books with us, and he also did some early concept work for 20 Double Fine Years. So hi Dom, if you're listening, thank you. So John or Rich, what were the things like early on? What did you think would be the kind of exciting elements of working on a Double Fine book? What were the things that you were kind of held dear to you? Spaff has mentioned that he has a very personal history of Double Fine. What were the kind of particular elements or the games or any of the things that kind of attracted either or both of you to working on a Double Fine book like this?
I mean, yeah, I'm definitely a huge fan of the the LucasArts adventure stuff, but it was I was one of the backers on Broken Age. It feels like ages ago now, and that brilliant pitch video that Tim did, that piece to camera talking about adventure games, where they'd all gone, and every sort of couple of years I Google adventure games because I was always in the hopes that some would exist, but they just never did. And then I saw that and I was very excited by it and I backed it. And I love Broken Age, but for me the real magical journey of that project was watching the Two Player Productions documentary as it ran all the way through. So basically I was seeing this little slice of life of Double Fine through however many years that entire process lasted, like a good couple of years. Yeah, ages, right? So it became a kind of
3 years maybe.
Yeah, 3 years. Yeah. So I was felt like it was a very personal and very well made documentary series, and I felt like a fly on the wall in that place. And then so yeah, it was just really nice to see the process of a game being developed sort of that intimately. And then the game was great anyway, but it was just really nice to see the studio from inside so intimately, like I said. And then John just texted me at some point. We play games together, and just texted me saying, "Are you up for a bit of design work?" I didn't realize it would be such a extensive project, but I was absolutely thrilled to be part of it.
Well, that's very nice to hear, and we were thrilled to have you be part of it, Rich. It's been fun, and maybe there'll be future adventures coming up as well. But so. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. John, I mean, we had lots of conversations about doing this book with Double Fine. The conversations originally were with Spaff and Greg Rice, who, well, sadly for Double Fine, but I guess it's Sony's to Sony's benefit that Greg's now over at Sony. What were do you remember what like the early conversations that we had? What were it like similarly? What were the sort of the things that you were excited to dig into?
I think for me, like whilst it's exciting to work with a studio to create something like this that have created some many games that I've loved playing. I think one of the interesting things from a kind of authorship editorial level is working with a studio and sort of cataloging and celebrating their history. Given that they've done so many different types of games, like Double Fine isn't like a shooter studio or a platformer studio or racing studio or whatever the genre is. It's there are so many games that are so different from one another. They some people, you could say there's like a kind of Double Fine essence. There's like the comedy and the creativity and the kind of not following the sort of video game fashions that kind of maybe is like and one of the essences of Double Fine, but kind of digging into talking to the people there and trying to find what it is that kind of drives a studio and makes it tick across such a broad range of games is very appealing when you've set out, like one of the reasons why we do books is because it's fun and a privilege, and it's a good responsibility to have to go in, understand the studio, really get a sense of who the studio is and who it makes games for and what it aims to do, and then communicate that to people and see people happy by taking in that information and that insight. So yeah, doing that with a studio of Double Fine's type that, as I said, kind of has all of these different games and different voices behind the games. That I think was, if I was going to pick out one thing, that's probably the most interesting thing. That was also the most difficult thing about making a book because like you're trying to find out across all of these different games, or you're trying to present the book in a cohesive way, but all the games are so different, visually different, gameplay wise are different, and different people have worked on them. So I mean, obviously, it's a great challenge to have. It's a great project to work on.
It reminded me a bit of our first book, in the sense that it was, because Double Fine is so there's probably a $10 word for it, but I'm just going to say kind of the equilibrium at Double Fine is very in balance. I know what I mean. But it reminded me of working on our first book, because that was kind of 20 odd different studios worth of content, and talking to each of those studios about their start and their focus and what they prioritize. And there was an element of that with the Double Fine book, even though it's one studio, because of the way that Double Fine works and kind of gives everybody a voice. I mean, he's famously known for things like Amnesia Fortnight, where anybody and everybody are encouraged to pitch game ideas, and you end up with multiple different stories. You don't just speak to somebody who is the sound person or a producer or the finance person even, and that's their whole contribution to Double Fine. They always have other kind of ways of contributing to Double Fine. So that was exciting. And John, as you say, it was one of the challenges of curating a coherent book that tells so many different stories. So, I mean, Spaff, what is it like working in such an environment where it is kind of everybody has lots of different hats and I don't really get the sense that anybody's kind of pigeonholed, right?
Yeah, I mean, until the acquisition from Xbox, we're an independent studio for nearly 20 years and operated on next to no budget for that entire time, more or less, or depending on the project, it would have slightly more budget perhaps than another. It just means that the studios had to be a very scrappy studio where people do wear lots of hats and do lots of different roles. And that filters through to the way the game team works is far less structured than most teams, which have like designers, and they design, and then programmers who program, and everybody is in their world. Whereas here there's a lot more ownership over pieces of the project, and programmers are designing things, and artists have to maybe do a bit of code or something. There's just this cross-pollination between everybody, and I think that shows in Psychonauts 2. It's pretty evident, I think, that it's a full team's creativity, and it's the kind of project that really needs that, I think, as well, because there's just so many ideas that it needs to be filled with. For me, it's a dream come true to be working here, as you may have guessed from my fandom of this place.
That just a little thing, but that a little bit of insight into how difficult it is to write a book. That what you're saying about Spaff, what you're saying about everyone has pitches in different ways, and their job title doesn't just define exactly what they do. Like it was still. I think we got a good balance in the book, but trying to list, like Lee Petty X job title on this game, but then on a different game it'll be a different job title, but then Lee did loads of stuff other than that in the game, so we're worried about okay, is this going to be confusing if he's this on this game and then we're listing and this on this game and this on this game, and then are we doing a disservice by only saying that this was his only thing on this game? So yeah, even job titles for different games were difficult to use as a means to really communicate, that sense of pitching and doing lots of different things that you're talking about.
Lee is also just a law unto himself, right? So, that's...
He's a powerhouse, that's for sure. But it's true, like we have, somebody might... Because Tim is like very eager to help people, be in a position and given a chance that he was given to lead a project and have their ideas be the driving force behind things. Amnesia Fortnight is one tool for that, like where people can kind of try out that role. And that has led to then bigger projects being led by other people. The first few, like Lee was one of them, making Stacking, which was an Amnesia Fortnight prototype. And then since then, of course, he's led multiple projects, Rad and Headlander. But then also he's an art director on other things, or just an artist. On Psychonauts 2, he was just an artist. He pitched in and did some boss designs and worked with the team and kind of step back. So yeah, everybody's constantly like moving around between different roles all the time.
I have a job title question. Who's the I've got the book in front of me and I can't now, even though I know the book so inside out, I can't actually find the right page. Who's the guy who's got the job title World Builder?
Jeff.
And how do you get that? I want to know.
That's probably Jeff
I want to know
Soulis,
the
yeah.
career path to when you can just write World Builder on a business card and it be legitimate. That's what I think I want for myself.
I think his role in Psychonauts 2 as I might get this slightly wrong, but I think it's a senior environment artist, and so that's his like chief thing that he's doing is he's a type of designer or / artist who is specifically creating the world. So taking the things that the team is modeling and the textures that they're drawing and the light, all this stuff, and kind of putting it all together in a space, hence building a world.
We had, I think that, Rich, that box art that you're talking about, we had originally on the Brütal Legend.
That's where I was just looking for it before we
the big
rid
album art, album cover art, double page. And then I think we very wisely decided that should just sit unadorned and took that
You're
out.
talking about cut content, Richard.
Oh, no. We didn't have any. Everything's in the book. Well, so yeah, that actually leads to another thing that... So one of my favourite things, and Spaff, just listening to you talk then, but one of my favourite things about doing this book is that the image in my head, I think very similar to Rich, that I had from watching that Two Player Productions documentary, watching multiple, actually, Two Player Productions documentaries of Double Fine, was almost like a sort of Nirvana type studio. And it was to my great relief, and also it was one of my favourite things, was that we came out to San Francisco to kind of be embedded in the studio for about a week. And I was really happy to find that is the truth of the place. I'm sure there's, office politics, and there's some people, it's not always happy families, obviously, like any family. But that, everybody just was as nice as they seem, and as open, and as just funny and creative, and all of that. So that was actually really lovely. That wasn't like, I didn't have that. It wasn't an illusion to be shattered. It was actually like a real thing. But to go from like one of my favorite things, Rich, do you recall, not a favorite, but just some of the sort of sections of the book that you particularly enjoyed working on, perhaps because of challenges that you overcame, or because of just the awesome assets you had to work with, or like, are there sort of certain bits that you look at that you remember particularly fondly?
Yeah, I mean, I've got this big archive of lovely Double Fine art assets now that are selling very nicely down on the South Bank. Yeah, do you know what?
Don't say that Xbox might be listening.
I think I'm particularly drawn to Peter Chan's stuff. It's funny. Anyone who was looking over my shoulder when I was working on various layouts for this thing, and whenever they'd say, "Oh, that page is amazing," it was usually just one that was a full bleed page of artwork from one of these artists, where basically I've done nothing. All I've done is just drop in this amazing art. My girlfriend goes, "That's such a great spread," and I'm like, "Yeah, of course it is. It's just a Peter Chan painting. Like, anyone can drop it in this box." Yeah,
Peter Chan being a concept artist who's worked with Double Fine for a very long time. He works on all sorts of other projects as well. But yes, if you've seen a Double Fine game, then you've seen Peter Chan's art for sure.
He's worked on, I think, all of Tim's games.
Yeah.
Ever. Or anything with Tim's name on it, I think. All of them. Day of the Tentacle being the first.
We've got that big Grim Fandango art piece in the book, haven't we? In the LucasArts remasters section.
I happen to have it open right now. This was
the dock area.
Three. I think it was maybe 3 or 4 amazing. It was broken up into 3 or 4 A3 pieces of paper, and had to sort of stitch them together. Hopefully, no one can notice where that is. I don't recall any particular.
And I know where it is.
Yeah, I think it's a really hard one. I was looking through this, and I'm trying to figure out what my favorite parts are. I think Peter Chan's style in particular draws me in. It's something about the perspective. He's able to draw this kind of slightly warped perspective that looks so correct in this kind of particular universe of his. I just don't understand how someone can do this. So basically,
he's not human. That's how.
Yeah, lots of billable hours just spent staring at these assets. I suppose, just kind of getting lost.
He's a very in-demand guy, and we're very lucky to be able to have any of his time, because he's normally just making. He works on like Harry Potter movies, Star Wars movies. He does all the storyboarding for like these huge projects. But because of his close connection with Tim, we'll just be able to get a little bit of his time, especially early on in the project. He helps with Tim's sort of ideation phase. His projects usually begin with an art jam where Tim will bring in, a group of artists, and they'll all talk through the ideas he has, and we'll just start sketching whatever, like crazy ideas. And so that's when Peter's usually mostly involved. It's quite early on.
That was, I think, probably one of the sweetest, John, I think you'll probably remember these interviews, but one of the sweetest things was talking to Peter Chan and to Bagel, who's Nathan Stapley, and to Scott
Campbell.
Thank you, Scott Campbell. Cameron, I was going
Scott
to say.
C is his name.
Scott C, yeah, Scott Campbell. Talking to all three of those very talented artists, and all three of them said that in an art jam situation, particularly the one I think that was caught by Two Player Productions for Broken Age, or Double Fine Adventure as it was then, that all three of them in their own way felt intimidated being in a room with the other two, and they felt kind of a bit like awkward initially, and they were like, well, I know why these guys are here, but why am I here? And all three of them said that. All three, without prompting. We didn't say, oh,
good
such
old
and such
imposter syndrome. It's good to see it. It's got its tendrils in absolutely every facet of the creative world, isn't it? I did think of one challenge just a second ago, because Double Fine delivered a lot of assets to you guys, John and Stace, and then you sort of curated another sort of level down, but then I was delivered a lot. So I think one challenge was definitely, I got quite a lot of freedom actually in choosing which ones should be down here. It's quite interesting to look at a massive file and try and decide what the fans would most want to see, i.e. what I would most want to see, but also knowing that somebody at some point at Double Fine created this who probably thought it was going on a hard drive forever after the game's out, and now
or in a drawer in some cases, it was literally physical pieces of art.
Yeah, or in a drawer, and then suddenly they're looking at a PDF preview of this book that's going to be printed and sent out to fans all over the world, and how jarring that might be. And it was quite interesting on some of the feedback when some of the artists had a look at it. There were notes on some drawings that I thought were amazing, and there were notes on it saying like, please don't put this in your book. Anything but this underlined 4 times. And I was like, oh man, yeah, it's quite interesting actually that there's some stuff in here that you actually hate, but all of it was, I love all of it.
Yeah, everybody's their own harshest critic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's getting all the art together, right? Getting all the art together was one of the biggest challenges of this entire project, because there's just so much of it. And
well done.
Spread out over, there's so much physical artwork that's just sitting in drawers, as Stace said, tons on hard drives, different places on our network. And, we were trying to get it over to you in the midst of this, quarantine situation, and we were upgrading our network, and we were just like missing pieces of it. I ended up sending you a hard drive of stuff, but then the hard drive was really crazy.
Because that actually speaks to the way this book was put together. John and I went over to San Francisco at the end. Was it the end of February 2020? Is that right, John? It
was end of February, I think. Yeah, we missed out on borders closing by not a lot.
Yeah. And we went over and we spent this time at the studio, and we went through these drawers, literally several chests of drawers with physical pieces of paper that had been in there for, in some cases, up to 20 odd years, because some of them were back from the original Psychonauts days. And that was a curation process in itself as well, just going through it is, John, you mentioned it already, but like it is an incredible privilege, and to be able to go through that art and a challenge in and of itself to choose what's going to go in this book. John, I wonder, so we've done all three of our books that we've done to date have been done broadly, I think, in the same way that, Richard alluded to it a little bit earlier on, that we take all of the assets that we have at kind of the top level and then filter those in some way, shape or form. But we then tend to provide to the designer that we're working with, in this case, Rich, previous book, it was Dom that I mentioned at the top, and kind of just give like production notes or like just a rough outline, right? Like, this is what we're trying to achieve. This is sort of the story we're trying to tell.
Well, we give the emotional story, yeah. Mm-hmm. Don't want to be too art school about it, but you try to give, like, this is the emotional story, this is the visual narrative that you want to tell, and these are like the key points we have to hit. So, for Psychonauts, like, we have to hit Raz, and we have to hit the other Psychonauts, and we have to hit the environments or whatever, along this predefined flow that we've decided. So, for Psychonauts, introduce Raz first, then introduce Psychonauts alongside their environments, and then talk about the antagonists or whatever. And then I cut you off before you actually ask whatever question you were going to ask.
That's fine. Yeah. I was doing that thing that I do where I wasn't actually going to ask a question. I was just going to keep rambling until somebody started talking instead. And fortunately you did. So yay. Yes, it was. I was just going to kind of alluding to that, really, that it was a privilege to go through that. I mean, I think we saw, I don't know that we got a final file size, but it must have been in the hundreds of gigabytes, if not.
Oh yeah,
if not over a terabyte or even two. Like, it was a lot of stuff, particularly once all of those hard flat files were scanned in. And I suppose that, Spaff, I think Double Fine probably deserves some sort of recognition that you've kept all of that material. I mean, is that, we've seen it a little bit in like we've spoken to Tim about this. We've also seen it in like the Two Player Productions documentaries where Tim has literally taken something out of the bin. I think Bagel threw something in the bin and Tim was like, no, everything is, stays. Everything is gold. Has that, since your time there, but also from previous to your time, do you get the impression that's always been a thing that's been important to the studio, to this kind of almost this historical documenting in progress? It's never previously been put into a book in this way, but like, it's all been kept, and it starts off on the wall perhaps in the studio and it goes into a drawer. Is that a thing that has always been kind of a very specific deliberate kind of choice, or is that just is that more of a hoarder's mentality that nobody wants to throw anything away?
I think it must be a very deliberate choice. I think it harkens back to Tim's days at LucasArts, and there's probably multiple factors at play there. I know that they celebrated all their artwork. I visited LucasArts back in the day, and they would, put it all up on their walls there too. But not enough of it, I always felt. They too sort of hid a lot of it away just for preservation. So there's probably some of that that's come over. Then I also think that, Tim leaving LucasArts, we had this idea that he wanted to make things that he owned, that no corporation owned, because to this day Disney now owns all of the Lucas stuff, all of Grim Fandango and Day of the Tentacle and Full Throttle, all of the artwork and everything. And I think that is upsetting to him, that more the thought that somebody else could create a sequel to one of those works and not involve him, and that he doesn't have access to some of that beautiful artwork. So Double Fine has really strived where possible to retain IP and retain all of our artwork and keep it all, safe. For me personally, as a person who's come from the world of fan sites and documenting a fandom of a place like this, finding and hunting down every little scrap of information or artwork or all those kinds of things. When I first came here, I would wander around the studio and sometimes find like a piece of incredible artwork just behind a couch, or I remember I was cleaning out a storage room that we used to have, and it's just filled with boxes of old consoles and useless junk. But I found a piece of printer paper that had one of the earliest sketches of the Double Fine logo on it. And it was just like under some stuff. And I was like, this is very important artwork. Why is it here? And that's now framed on the wall, in the other room over there. But I think it's probably in the book also.
We certainly do have that
sure.
double page on like the evolution of the logo, which I think that's one of those fascinating. It's almost like I kind of think of it almost like environmental storytelling in a video game. Like there's no like words to that story. You don't look at that and kind of see a very specific through line, but you just understand that was an iterative evolution that then kind of eventually culminated in this logo that is, I think it's fair to say, kind of very Double Fine. It's, slightly offbeat, it's quirky, it's creative, it's all of those things that
people don't know quite what it is.
No.
You get Bumblebee a lot.
The fact that it's called a two-headed baby is, slightly disturbing. But hey.
We nickname him 2HB, and 2HB is I'm not entirely sure where that comes from, but I know in Scott C's comics, he's a character and is called 2HB in there, and so whether that was before that moment he was nicknamed that or not, I'm not sure, but certainly from
chicken
there.
and egg. Yeah. Okay, so John, I think one of the key things, again, you alluded to it earlier, one of the key things was bringing all of these very different titles into one book. And as we know, Double Fine has not made a habit of making sequels. It took them 20 years thereabouts to make a sequel to Psychonauts. So when putting the book together, how, like, did you have a sort of an eye for having things in a certain, having the story told in a certain way, or have visually, or having like one game flow into another? Did you feel like that process was fairly natural process, or was there sort of some that just didn't, like some spreads that just really refused to coalesce?
Yeah, I'm going to call that one spread that we all hate now. No,
but we loved it eventually.
No, I think it's a challenge because you want the story. So we kind of set ourselves the goal of the book needed to be enjoyable and readable and make sense whether you were, or no matter whether you were just dipping into each game, each section by itself at a random order, or if you were reading it front to back. And I think so therefore each section had to have something interesting to say in isolation, but then also add to some bigger cohesive whole if you were reading it chronologically. I think given that we did so many interviews and people had so much to say, it was never a challenge to find something to write about that gave some interesting piece of information about every game included in the book beyond just the basic sort of factual elements. So I think if you read the book, then I hope, or the goal was, that each game section gives you something about Double Fine. So I'm thinking the Middle Manager of Justice spread. Key is talking there about how that he was quite nervous about going into it because he'd never project managed something, but then going into it and flexing different muscles, and then also having appreciation of what different skills are required to be a project manager, rather than just being good at X, being good at programming art or whatever. And it's quite a nice sort of synergy there that the game is about a manager as well. So I think that was the main. Yeah, it was just about making sure every game, every section spoke about the game. The game was understood if you didn't play it or hadn't played it yet. But then also there's a story that came from that game through our interviews that tells you something more about what Double Fine is, or what its mantra is, or what it aims for, or what is important to people at the studio, rather than a best of these are 20 years and these are the games, and this is what this game is. That's fine, and the images look nice, but yeah, I don't know. I guess we just wanted it to be more than that, like this game, and here's a little nugget of Double Fine and what they are and what they aim to be alongside that.
Yeah, it was. I mean, as you say, but there was so much interview material that it was more a what stories
like
do we want to
it
tell?
down more than trying to
absolutely. It wasn't
fit
like
stuff in.
So we're going to use that one story that one person told us. It's more like, well, like what stories do we want to tell here? And I think that was the way that everything does feed into each other. And Double Fine's history, and Spaff, you'll be able to talk to this very clearly, I would imagine, but Double Fine's history there's been kind of a series of almost like flashpoints, like just teetering on the brink of falling off a cliff, and then something, well, I say something saves the day. Usually it's the staff. Usually it's the studio that saves the day. It's the creativity of the studio, and things like the Brütal Legend 2 title being cancelled and then turning to like, well, what are we going to do next? And looking internally to like Amnesia Fortnite and using those games that come out of that to release. It's a very romantic notion, this kind of flying by the seat of your pants. It could all come crashing down at any moment. It sounds very romantic. It's a very like, oh, this struggling artist kind of vision. Have you personally, in your time at Double Fine, kind of lived through, or career-wise, lived through any of those moments, or have you kind of spoken to people that have prior to that? And do you get a sense for kind of how that actually is to live through, rather than sort of the very romantic vision that it sounds like?
I mean, it's as worrisome and stressful as you probably can imagine it is, and especially for the people who are like Greg, whose prime responsibility at the studio was trying to find money, to keep the company going, and the pressure that must come with to feel like, if you don't succeed, then it's all over at any moment. It's hardcore. But yeah, I mean, even through Psychonauts 2, it was all ups and downs. I mean, we crowdfunded it to begin with, and that's great. That got us off the ground. But we knew we would have to find a publishing partner to actually, finish this thing. And we did. And then they went bankrupt, and that was fun. And we were just sitting there like, what? And luckily the Swedish government has a very good policy about bankruptcies, and made sure that we were looked after somehow, thanks to the Swedish government.
So if you're going to partner with a company that's going to go bankrupt, partner with a Swedish company. That's the moral of that story.
Almost 20 years into the company, we've been acquired by Xbox. We're part of the Xbox Game Studios. And initially, it was a feeling of like, oh no, I'm not sure I want that to happen. But actually, if you think about it for even 5 seconds, just adding that layer of security and having somebody that's got your back like that is just a huge relief for basically everybody, and it allows us to continue what we're doing just without having to scramble all the time. And it actually, I think, will lead to even greater creativity, because we no longer have to, try and get somebody to fund something and be really specific about it and try and fit into a genre that's that they're into right now, or whatever. We can kind of do whatever we want to, more or less.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's especially true as it very much seems like Xbox have made that purchase because they want Double Fine to be Double Fine, right? Like they're not trying to turn Double Fine into something else. It's something that Tim spoke about, speaking to some of the studio heads at some of the other studios that had been acquired by Xbox prior to Double Fine, and there was an element of like disbelief of, they're saying that the deal is, we buy you, but you basically carry on as normal, and we want you to keep doing that. Is that legit? Because it sounds too good to be true. And evidently the people that Tim spoke to said, yeah, absolutely it is. And that's, I mean, you're now, what is it? Is it 2 years in now?
Yeah, it must be, or maybe a bit more.
So
I don't remember now. The last couple of years have been a bit of a blur.
Yeah, the last 2 years haven't felt like 2 years. Yeah, for sure.
But so far, so good. And like, hopefully they are pleased with us. We've put out a game that is, critically acclaimed and is getting lots of award nominations, and We got Xbox Game of the Year at the Golden Joysticks last week, which hopefully means Xbox is pleased with us.
Yay!
But we shall see as we come off this big project and start working on the future of what we want to do. I know, for instance, that Lee has some big ideas to make something that's even weirder than anything he's ever made before. So we'll see where
Lee's going to out-weird himself. That's good to hear. Okay, so I think as we move towards wrapping up, we're not quite there, but as we move towards wrapping up, so something that I personally like about what we do, the books that we make, is this notion of kind of a legacy thing, which sounds quite grandiose and it sounds quite, I guess in some sense, egotistical. But I've got kids now, and I like that idea that there is a world in which we can all go to the British Library and request that we see the book that's been submitted to them, because that's how it works. Publication works. You have to send copies of the book to various libraries around the UK. So I like that. It's kind of it's a nice feeling that here's this everlasting thing, particularly in a very digital world. I mean, we're doing this podcast, all four of us are in different places, literally different parts of the world. I'd wonder if for any of you guys, is there like any part of either on this book, hopefully, but even just in your general kind of day-to-day careers, are there particular things that you are, I guess, proud of or enjoy about what you do, like along those same lines, kind of that legacy aspect, or that it means something to somebody else? Like, what's the sort of, I guess this is open to anybody that has an answer first, but what's kind of one of those things for you that has importance and elevates kind of the Monday to Friday 9 to 5 above just the job?
Well, I mean, I can speak on that in relation to the book. I mean, I don't think, I think one of the reasons that inspired me anyway to start writing books about games in general, and this book being an example of that, is I don't always think games industry in general is especially good at kind of slowing down for a second and appreciating itself and what it's done. It's kind of always tends to be like the next thing is the best thing, and like the next thing is the only thing. And that kind of makes sense, right? Like, it's a very technology-driven industry. Technology moves on, etc. But I think, I don't know, with books like this, it's nice just to slow down and appreciate what we've got and what we have and the things that go on behind the scenes of, because all you tend to see is the result, but of the release game. But there's a lot of interesting stuff. There's a lot of interesting things and people behind those. So kind of shining a light on that, like a light that exists permanently, like physically, with a book is very, I don't know, fulfilling, I guess.
It's a similar angle from me as well. It's if you look at design jobs, it's kind of all about digital and motion design, and that's kind of where people say you should go if you kind of want to succeed at this and make good money and everything. But it's really, really satisfying to have such a mighty tome come out at the end of it, and this thing will just exist and will make fans very happy. And it was just really nice to just drill down into something, because it was like slowing down, kind of like John's saying, and kind of working through this systematically and methodically, which is really nice, because with a lot of design stuff, it's a lot of last minute requests, and it's digital stuff, and it appears, and we need this now, and you kind of get it out the door, and it just kind of flitters off into the internet, and you sort of never think about it ever again. But it's a satisfying thought knowing I could just pull this thing down once in a while and just have a little flick through, and so I'm feeling that legacy vibe, and I hit my face on every single spread, which
a watermark.
You look under a UV light.
Yeah, I'm riddled through this book. That was my sort of legacy input.
Thanks, Rich. That's a great advert. Buy 20 Double Fine years. It's riddled with.
I think on this
Spaff, what's your? I mean, yours is, I don't know, maybe a bit different. Well, you can tell us, maybe a bit different, because I guess you already get to do that to an extent, right? Like you work at Double Fine that makes games and has done so for a very long time. And there is that legacy aspect just immediately there. You know, the fact that people are still playing both Double Fine's older games and Tim's older games as well, is kind of, it's sort of a self-fulfilling legacy element. But is there something like that for you in your day-to-day?
I mean, I think, so looking at this book especially, like if you coming to it as both the long-standing fan and so therefore somewhat of a historian of the, you know, the things that these people have been doing. And then also as a person who's worked in community management for a very long time, in which I really see a big part of the role of a community person or person that works in like a PR or, you know, this kind of role where you're facilitating access between the interesting people that are making interesting things and the people that want to talk to them, and really, you know, providing a platform to share those stories and to get that information out there. And so when doing a book like this, one of my absolute favorite things about it is that we don't just look at the games, the 20 games that Double Fine has made, but we look at the other aspects, the Amateur Fortnight, Day of the Devs, Double Fine Presents. You know, there's a whole section of fan art, the influence of the company. There's all these human aspects of the book, and it's really allowed, you know, I know these people and I know all the fantastic things they do, and I love hearing about them. And there's all these tiny moments even that I think are fascinating. And this book has allowed everyone's legacy from this company, or as many, maybe not everybody, but loads and loads of people to get a moment in the spotlight to kind of share some of their involvement in all these wonderful moments and things and events, games. So for me personally, that's a really big part of. It's not just my legacy. I get to help the legacy of this company and everybody here. Get out there into the world. And so props to you guys also for working with us on that. I remember at the beginning of this project, you know, we sat here and obviously the first thing is like, right, we got to do sections and all the games. But then I just started throwing all these other things at you too. It's like, oh, the story's not complete unless we talk about Amateur Fortnight, Day of the Devs, Double Fine Presents, blah, blah, blah. You know, sometimes we have picnics. Here's a load of photos of us through the years. Like, here's up, there's all these random other things. And for you to be able to somehow get basically all of it into that book is pretty astonishing. Be it through the wordsmithing and interviews, graphic design work, all of that stuff. It's really a detailed book, much more so than most, I think. There's a lot of art books from our industry, but they don't go into any detail, like this. They're just, this is a phenomenal piece of work, I think. So thanks.
Thanks
very much.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. What a wonderful testimonial.
We'll invite you back on.
Yeah, thanks. Pay you later. Awesome. Well, that seems to me like a very, very nice place to stop. If this chat has whetted your appetite for 20 Double Fine years, then please do go and check it out. It's available at indiebydesign.net and also at doublefinebook.com. We've also got a load of podcast episodes over there. There's lots of other stuff that we do as well. So go and have a look at that if you would like to. And I don't think there's much more to say apart from you can catch us on all of the usual social media channels. We are at Indie by Design. Come and join the conversation. Let us know what your favourite parts of Double Fine are and what your favourite parts of 20 Double Fine years are. And until next time, we will see you then.